Hello. Is that time again? You are listening to Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome and thanks to new and returning listeners. Glad to be with you. I am returned to the States for those of you who've been following along. I made it back from my European trip. I did catch a bit of a cold on my last day in Switzerland, of course. So I've been a bit under the weather upon returning, only now emerging from it. But it was a great trip, and it's good to be back. It's really just wonderful to be with my family. I'm so grateful for my wife and my two wonderful children. I missed them. And this morning, it was Sunday morning, and I took my two daughters to go have brunch. It's sort of been a thing that I've done with them, just go get eggs and potatoes and pancakes and a waffle. We get everything, and I ate way too much. But it was so great. They're getting so much older. And my youngest, I'm so amazed. She's really developing quite a sense of humor and a personality. She likes to take on different personas from time to time. And this morning when we went to brunch, she went as Ninja Cat. It's so cute. So I'll say, "Hey, Annabelle, do you want some more pancakes?" And she'll say, "Dad, did you mean Ninja Cat?" And I'll say, "Oh yeah, that's what I meant. Ninja Cat, do you want to have some more pancakes?" And then she'll say, "Yeah, Ninja Cat wants to have some more pancakes." Like that. It's so sweet. I mean, she's 3 years old. You gotta picture it. Cute little blonde, blue-eyed 3-year-old saying, "Ninja Cat!" It's so fun. I had a good morning being a dad. And it's also been really interesting to just return back to my regular drop-in classes, having had this trip away to teach these workshops in London and Switzerland. Those of you who teach know there's a really big difference when you do a workshop, especially when people come to that workshop knowing your work and what you do and are interested to inquire into that, as opposed to just drop-in classes where anybody shows up. Some people you've never met before, most of them. It's a very different dynamic, right? And I kind of get why more senior teachers at some point sort of move away from teaching the drop-in classes. One, it's more work. It feels better to have people who come and want to really engage and question, as opposed to people who come because they think they're going to get a workout, which is what I wrote about a couple months ago. There's just a big difference between kind of the workshop context and the drop-in class context. But I'm going to keep teaching those drop-in classes. I like to be in that mix. Speaking of the mix of yoga, I don't know if everybody listening isn't aware, but there's considerable turmoil in many different sectors of the yoga world right now. Like, shit is getting real in the Yoga Land parking lot. And if you don't know that reference, you should go Google "getting real in the Whole Foods parking lot." I saw that video again recently. I don't know if you guys know it, but it's funny, and shit's getting real in the Yoga Land parking lot for sure. I think I might have mentioned that there's a lot going on in the Ashtanga yoga community right now. There was like a purging of teachers from the official authorized teacher list. There was a set of new regulations that authorized teachers are now being forced to agree to if they want to be authorized teachers. There's still the ongoing conversation around what to do with the revelations that Patabi Joyce was touching women inappropriately for many years. A lot of people have decided to take pictures of Pattabhi Jois down off of their altars. A lot of people don't know where they stand. A lot of people feel that victims aren't getting enough voice. You should check out what Karen Rain is posting on Facebook, and there's just a lot going on in the Ashtanga Yoga world. And then, in the sort of school that I align with more, the Desikachar, Krishnamacharya tradition, Desikachar's son Kaustubh put out this email saying that the word Vinaya is now the official word, and he's trademarked it in 30 countries. He's trying to seize control over the term Vinaya again, which Gary Kraftstow has been using for 20 some odd years since Desikachar told us not to use it. But it's so wild. It's sort of like this interesting thing of when lineage becomes family business. And what that means, Maybe it was always both, but when you make business decisions to protect the lineage, And you have all these people who've aligned with it and sort of taught the principles of those practices and done it with their hearts and developed yoga communities, and then now there's the orthodoxy of the tradition, and then all the people who've been making it the tradition up until now. I sort of talked about this with Rex Anthony, who was on a couple of weeks ago. So it's just a really wild time. I mean, we've talked about the shifting paradigm on this podcast. Well, it's really coming to foot, You have to really see how all this plays out. I'll certainly have some people coming on to discuss these matters. But let's talk about who's on today, because today I have Amina Naru. And Amina is on the board of the Yoga Service Council. They recently put out a new document, Best Practices for Yoga in the Criminal Justice System. I recorded this with Amina the day before Christmas. You'll hear we mention it. And I didn't really know what I was getting into so much. My friend Carol Horton, who's been on this podcast before, suggested that I might talk to Amina and that she had a really interesting personal story, but she didn't tell me anything about it. And you'll hear it kind of takes me a while to get to that in the conversation, because it's it's deeply personal stuff, and I don't want to I don't want to be intrusive. I want it to feel natural. And again, I didn't really know her story, but it ultimately does come out in the course of this conversation. And there's a point in this talk where I break down emotionally, I lose it. I'm sobbing because I just was really moved. I was really moved by her story and just what the message of her story is. So I'm excited for you guys to hear that today. Before we do, let me drop my stuff. I am going to be in Armonk, New York on February 3rd. I'm also going to be in Mamaroneck, New York on the same day. We added another date at another spot, Tovami Yoga. I'm going to be at Sage and the Flying Buddha in the early part of the day, and I'm going to be at Tovami in the later part of the day. They agreed to it. So there's 2 opportunities to see me in New York on February 3rd. Then I'm going to be in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, February 16th through 18th. I'm doing that 2-weekend long intensive here in Easton, Pennsylvania, March 2nd through 4th and 9th through 11th. I'm going to be back in Japan again, March 16th through 25th. I got some new dates in April. I'm going to be at Sacred Rivers Yoga in East Hartford, Connecticut, April 8th. I'm going to be at Tadasana and Balance in Fishkill, New York, April 14th. And I am going to be back at the Yogi Underground in Falls Church, Virginia, April 27th through 29th. You can find out about all those gigs and some more, actually. You can listen to the archives of this podcast and read my blog and find my online yoga video offerings, including my live stream subscription, where you can take some of those drop-in classes and actually get to see how I deal with those situations. All of that can be found at jbrownyoga.com. maybe if you've been listening to the podcast and you've been enjoying it and getting something from it, you would give a little back and show a little support by going to a blog or podcast page and making a direct donation, or going to Apple Podcasts and iTunes and making a review and giving us a star rating. That would be super helpful and greatly appreciated. Okay, what else? Let me mention that next week is the 100th episode of this podcast with Richard Freeman. And a couple people didn't hear me last week on the outro and wrote me some emails and mentioned that he was on another podcast. And I know that he recorded another podcast, but believe me, there's lots of places we went together that they didn't go in that other recording. So not to worry. And it's a very exciting, momentous occasion for the podcast and a very momentous guest and conversation to go with it. You will get to hear that next week. Okay, I think that's good. I will check in with you on the other side. But let's go ahead now and listen to this talk I had with Amina Naru. Hello?
Hi, is this Jay?
This is Jay. Is this Amina?
Hi, Jay. Yes, it is. I thought we were doing video.
No video, because if we do the video, then we don't get as good an audio signal.
Oh, okay. I understand.
Yeah. I hope that's okay. I mean, not that I wouldn't want to see your face, but that in a way there's a voice-to-voice thing that happens that I really like.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
Cool. Well, how are you today?
Pretty good, actually. Day after Christmas, getting back into the flow of things.
Yeah, are you at home, or did you travel to see family?
No, I'm at home. My family is like super small, so we're all here in Delaware.
Well, I'm actually not at home. I went to my in-laws' place. That's like the annual family gathering for my wife's family that I got adopted into like 14 years ago.
Oh, wow. And where's that?
That's in North Garden, Virginia.
Oh.
And I got permission from my wife before we came to have this time to steal away and have this talk with you.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad, because I was wondering if, when I set the date and time, I was like, I wonder if that's cool with your schedule, but I guess it wouldn't have been available if it wasn't.
Yeah, I left it open because I didn't think it would be a problem. And when I talked with my wife, she was cool with it. So we're good.
Wonderful. I'm glad.
Right on. And it's good to get a chance to talk to you. I appreciate your time. Carol and I are friends, and when she was talking to me about some of the new stuff that Yoga Service Council is doing, I always like to get an update, and I know that you were very involved with all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm wondering, before we even get into that, like in our email interactions, you had two different names, and I'm always curious whenever someone has two different names, and I was told that you go by Amina, but you have another name, and I was just wondering about that, and when does that happen for you, and why does that happen for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It has been the question of the year.
I see.
Yeah, so my birth name is Charlene Sams, and Charlene Antoinette Sams, my grandmother, named me. And so I've been going through life as Charlene Sams, until I got married, and then it was a Livingston added on. But I would say this last year, 2017, has been like kind of challenging on a personal level. And I feel like I reached a part in my meditation practice that took me to something different. I have recently started practicing transcendental meditation, and it was in probably like April. I felt something different, and when I explain it as a texture like a vibration that I could actually sense the texture of it. And so this was different, and every time I would go into the meditation and feel this texture or vibration, I would start to like question it. And what came up for me was that this was my vibration. Like, if I had to put it into words, I would say maybe something similar to a higher self or a higher energetic part of myself that I was meeting with in these meditations. And as time went on, the name started to come. Like, it was Naru is something that was given to me or told to me by one of my spiritual teachers years ago as the spiritual lineage that, your soul is attached to. And, I kind of took it with a grain of salt. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then and never, like touched it again or thought about it. And so it was very strange and weird to me that name was coming up, with that texture and vibration. And I was just like, this is different. And, I continued to, meet with this energy. And then Amina came up. And it wasn't Amina, it was Amina. Amina, Amina. And that's what kept coming, like being repeated to me. And so I just started coming out of meditation and before, like journaling and, asking these questions on paper and then going into the meditation and then coming up with Amina Naru. And I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? It was so weird. And I told one of my best friends about it, and I was like, I think I'm supposed to change my name. And she was just like, that's interesting. And I left it there. As I got closer towards the Yoga Service Council conference that we have every May at Omega Institute, it became more and more like in my face, like, what are you going to do with this? And when I went for our meeting, I talked about it with some of my board members. I'm like, yeah, this is coming up in my meditation, and I feel like I'm supposed to change my name, but I've never done anything like that. And, my colleagues were just like, oh my God, this is awesome. They were super excited, and it was kind of like this part of me was being born and accepted and acknowledged. And from that point on, I was being called Amina Naru. And it just felt right. It was like...
Wow, so that's amazing. Let me ask you a question about it. I'm intrigued very much by your choice of words, like the choice of texture and vibration. Vibration is one that I would use, but texture, just like the taste of something or the feeling of something while you're sitting. I assume your meditation practice takes the form of sitting. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. And so in that texture, it seems like you received some kind of communication, like these sounds of a name came to you. So I'm wondering, do you have an idea about where that comes from? Does that come from within you or from like other beings who give you information? I'm just like, where do you think it comes from, that kind of communication? I certainly feel like I've gotten certain signs in my life. It's not always like sounds like what you're describing, but like certain communications. And I'm wondering, where do you think those come from?
Yeah, I'm not sure. My speculation is that I know it's definitely coming from something outside of myself, and I'm very much in tune with like spirit guides. And my spiritual team. I'm very much aware that there is a team of higher beings that are, set out to help me on this journey called life, right? So when I am meditating, I do feel that is when I have that connection the strongest. I also got
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said a spiritual team. Is that what you called that?
Yeah.
Like a team of beings out there who have got your back.
Exactly. Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
I like that a lot. Sorry to interrupt, but I just needed to say that out loud again. I like the way that sounds a lot.
No, awesome. Because, and I kind of like came into this knowledge, I think like around maybe 2007 or 6 when I first started feeling like I was really awakening or tapping into something.
And so what was happening before that, though?
Yeah, right. Before that, it was the Charlene show.
Yeah.
Everything was all about me and based on my energy and what I could do. And if I couldn't do it, it wasn't going to get done. And I was this solo person trying to navigate this life, and if I didn't go to church, then I didn't have any spiritual help, that kind of concept.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Newark, Delaware. With my grandmother, yeah.
I see.
And
and your grandmother was very religious?
Well, she, as it's me and my sister, and we grew up in church, so it was important for us to go to church. But we, like, Graham wasn't in church with us.
I see. She just made you go?
Yeah, she made us go to church. So that was part of the rules of the house.
I see. I bring that up only because it's like it's holiday time as we started, and you often see family, and then this is a recent phenomena that you have this name come to you that you decide to take. How does your family feel about it?
Well, that's a whole nother thing. They're just like, because I was like super excited and scared at the same time, right? And so I bring this to my sister, who's 6 years younger than me, and she's just like, yeah, okay.
Crazy Charlene decided to change her name.
Yeah, exactly. And then when I said, well, it's Amina, and she goes,
oh,
that's
now you're going to have
Amina.
to correct everybody on how to say it every time.
Exactly. So there's like this downplay, I feel, of like, oh, that's just that yoga stuff you're into, because I am just the oddball in my family, the oddball, but the successful, persevering person in the family who does things that nobody else kind of thinks of. And then, when it gets done or when I get these accomplishments, they're kind of like just sitting back looking like, wow,
Yeah, I'm definitely the odd one out in my family, and my family's not very good at communicating. I'm one of the few people who are like kind of capable of it. And I think that they sort of recognize that in some fashion, but they also, like, I don't have a lot of contact with a lot of them because, you got to be able to communicate or we're not going to be able to, like, have a relationship,
Exactly. But I saw that we have something in common. I think I checked out one of your interviews, and I understand that you lost your mom. Your mom passed at a young age.
Yeah, that's right, when I was 16.
Wow. And when I was listening to the interview, I was just like, oh, wow, because my mom passed in 2014. Oh. I wasn't a teenager, but, hearing your story on that really just brought me back into all of the emotions and all of that, that stuff you go through, the layers that you get pulled back, and how I have my practice and I have my yoga family, but there was still this big gaping hole at the same time that, I had to find my way through and navigate through. So
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, my mom was really the one who kind of held our small family together. And when she passed, everybody went off in different directions. And I mean, it's not like I don't have relationships with people, but we don't come together like we did around my mom. And and certainly my mom, the reason I talk about that so openly is because that is absolutely like, I don't know, the life occurrence that sent me on my path, of it being like a spiritual oriented lifestyle, like you're describing. And I'm wondering, for you, that's really fresh. Like, that's just a couple of years ago that happened.
Yeah.
So you had already built up some tools, I'm imagining, to handle that when it came.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so let's talk about some of those tools. Like, when do you go from living with your grandma in Delaware to like practicing yoga? Like, when does that happen for you?
Well, so how this all started, I was like doing a lot of walking and jogging, like 5 miles 3 times a week. And that was like my meditation, so with this workout that I was doing, I realized that, I'm like super tight and I wasn't stretching properly. And I had this bright idea. I didn't know much about yoga, but I knew it was like stretching. So I was like, I'm going to go to the store and get a yoga DVD. So I went down to the Best Buy, found one that said, beginner yoga, and I started doing it after my walks and jogging. And it was awesome. I felt amazing.
Do you remember the DVD, like which one it was?
Absolutely. My first teacher was Elena Brower.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's been on the podcast. It was really early on, and I wasn't doing a very good job, but I know her from the past. So one of her videos was the first one you got?
The very first introduction to yoga ever, Elena Brower.
All right, from the Best Buy, is that what you said? Is that where you got it? Where did you get it?
Best Buy,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, an electronic appliance store. Yep.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. See, this podcast is all about how, I don't know, like yoga has sort of come into the West, and just the idea that, like, we have people on the podcast who talk about, practicing with these Indian gurus and their first time they came to America and stuff. But then that all trickled out in all kinds of directions, even into like the DVD rack of the Best Buy.
Yeah. Yeah,
and into your hands,
And into my hands. How, when I think about it, it's like, how else could that have happened if, there wasn't any DVDs of yoga, if it was still,
I know. And at that time it was pre-internet, right?
Yeah, because that was 2009.
Oh, okay, so not so long ago. All right, so you get your Elena DVD and you take it home, and that becomes part of your routine.
I'm sorry, that was 2006. Yeah, 2006, and in 2009 is when I'll get into that and what happened then. That's when I went to my first yoga studio.
Okay, so you get the DVD in 2006, and that just becomes part of your routine. You already have kind of like a practice of walking and then doing some stretching, you said.
Yeah, that was my only practice, besides a little meditation that I had dabbled in from reading the Kabbalah.
And what do you... Oh, Kabbalah? You read the Kabbalah?
Yeah.
Wow. So what do you do to pay your rent around this time?
Oh, during that time,
yeah.
I worked full-time at a local hospital.
Okay.
And so that was my full-time job, and I was working night shift. And my extracurricular goals or activities was pursuing a music career. So,
are you a singer?
Yeah, nice. I used to sing R&B and reggae and wrote songs and traveled and, did the whole recording artist thing.
Yeah, I was a starving musician in my previous incarnation as well. I'm a self-taught bass player, and I toured around with a crazy band for a while too. So that was the only other things that I've ever really discovered in life that bring me like a truly pure joy. other than like yoga is playing the electric bass guitar.
That passion for music, is very, very much the same passion that I have for yoga. So
yeah, it's primal. It's like a primal thing when you like lock in and like the music happens. It's like,
oh my goodness,
it's a magic.
Yeah, that's another that was another avenue where I learned about the spiritual helpers as well, as far as in songwriting. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, I mean, when you're out on the road, though, I remember like being out on the road, and there was like a little circuit of like people who would let you sleep on couches, and like, I don't know, there was a time where I remember having some very romantic times in a van driving across the country, you know. And there was definitely spiritual guides leading our way, you know.
Very surreal moments. Yeah,
totally.
But so
all right, so you're laying a DVD for a while, and you're working at the hospital, and then you're pursuing lots of other stuff on the side.
Yeah. So this whole jogging thing and walking, power walking was extremely important because that was my only physical fitness. And so I started doing a yoga DVD. And after a while, I was just like, yo, something is like, there's something going on here. I was like, this is just more than stretching. I felt better overall, like, balanced and happier. And I went to work and I started telling my colleagues about this yoga thing. Like, oh my God, it would be a friend's birthday, one of my coworkers or something. They got yoga DVDs. They knew anything. If it was time for Pollyanna or anything, I'm giving them a yoga book or a DVD.
Well, they can usually tell. I mean, I always like to say, it's something I heard Jessica Char say once, actually, that like, stuff that was bothering you is not bothering you as much.
Yes.
And I've always liked that. And when you get to feel that, like when you're not as bothered by things, the people around you seem to notice that. They're like, hey, you're not as bothered by everything as you were. What are you doing? And then when you say, oh, this yoga thing's helping me out, then they want to check it out.
Yeah, so I had a lot of interesting interested colleagues. And then I the DVD thing, I started like a little collection. I got a what is that called, Kundalini yoga DVD.
Oh,
and I
you
started doing
expanding your repertoire.
Yeah, I started expanding, and then I got like a Rodney Yee, and these were just DVDs that I now have variety. I could pop in according to how I felt, and I wasn't doing the yoga DVDs with just the walking or running. I was like, popping it in the morning and doing a practice before going to work and things like that. I was working evening shift and night shift. So, in around 2009, but I thought it stopped there for me. I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I like this yoga thing, and it's pretty cool. And I did try to find a yoga studio in the area, which I was unsuccessful with. And
like there just wasn't one around that was convenient?
Right. And then that time I lived in Newcastle, and I was looking more toward, I was like, if there's a yoga studio anywhere, it would probably be in Wilmington because that's like our downtown area. And nothing came up. So like in 2009, one of my colleagues who I had given a yoga DVD to approached me and was like, hey, I've been going to this yoga studio and I think you should come. And I was just like, a yoga studio? Wow. I was excited. Where's it at? And then she was like, I go on Sunday mornings and it's hot yoga. You got to come. And, working night shift and evenings, I was like not a fan of morning time, doing anything in the morning, matter of fact, especially on a Sunday.
Yeah. I'm like a 10 to 2 p.m. sometime in there kind of practice time.
Yes.
I don't like that early morning stuff either,
But, after a few weeks, I did it. I went, I met her there, and it was the most phenomenal experience ever. I mean, it was from that day on, I never looked back. Yoga just, came into my life in a huge way. And
was it a straight up Bikram series, or was it like a hybrid?
It was a hybrid of Bikram. It wasn't, the Bikram brand, but, this particular studio had kind of taken it and, cultivated their own stationary practice. And it was a 90-minute practice. And afterwards, I was so, open and, the detoxifying feeling from all that sweat and, I was
just the group vibe too, I'm sure you were doing it all by yourself with the DVD. To get in a big room, a bunch of people all doing it in the sync thing like that is kind of has power,
That was another powerful component of it. And from that day on, I think I got a unlimited package that week, and I just went so hard with just dove right in.
Okay. You use the word hard. Yeah, I did the same thing. You get a taste and you're like, oh, I'm down with this. And I was going every day, sometimes more than one class a day.
Exactly. It became an addiction. Yeah. And, my family, I'm from a family of addicts, but I didn't get the gene, or that gene didn't turn on for me as far as drugs go, but I have an addictive personality. So it was something that was so amazing and felt so good. I was going every day, like you said, sometimes twice a day, however I could get it in. And then I realized, I was like, you know what? I want other people like me to have this experience too, because I felt that I was healing myself on a deeper level, because that next winter, when I went to my doctor, he was like, here's your prescription because I had been diagnosed with SAD, seasonal affective disorder, and clinical depression.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Seasonal affective disorder. It's
I don't know what that is. I'm sorry. Can you tell me something?
Sure. Yeah, it's like depression that comes in at when the season changes into the fall and winter. So because there's less amount of light you're being exposed to, it kind of triggers this feeling of, they call it the blues.
Yeah, I certainly feel like there's a thing that happens when when it shifts, but I'm able to manage it. But if you're not, that there's a specific condition for that. That's interesting. I haven't heard of that before.
Yeah, they call it SAD.
Oh. That's sort of perfectly appropriate too, right? It's sad. All right.
Seasonal affective disorder. Yeah.
All right. So you struggled with some of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and he always wanted to give me medication for that, and because I would need to take time off of work sometimes because I didn't feel good because of this condition. You have to be accepting or taking some type of medicine for it, but and he would get upset when I was not taking the medicine. But there was times when I'm like, today is a really horrible day. Like, I'm not even getting out of bed today. I think I need to. That was my tool, my go-to, right? Pop a pill or something.
Yeah, it is like a backup if you had to.
Yeah, the backup. Well, that winter came through, and I felt fantastic. I was on cloud nine. I was like, I don't need anything. No, I don't want a prescription. And he's like, you still should take it. And I'm like, I'm doing yoga now. And I have an Indian doctor, and I thought that maybe he would understand.
Yeah, no, probably not. They still want,
No, he still pushed the prescription. But, and from that point on, I have never, except for when my mom passed, that's when that sad thing kind of reoccurred with that winter. But, from that point on, I had not had any problems with depression or feeling, upset or depressed throughout the winter months. So I feel like I was healing myself, and I wanted to share it with everybody, especially people who could not afford to go to a yoga studio because yoga was expensive.
Yeah, it got more and more expensive. Even by come 2009, it was already super popular, and people were making money.
Yeah, and especially if you're going to a hot yoga studio, it's
They're packing them in, and
they're packing them in, and everybody's paying I think now they're charging like $20 a class at the place I was going, but then it was like $15-17 a class, and I was a married woman with kids and a mortgage, and you got car payment, and you got this and you got that, and your kids are doing activities that require your expendable income, and so it was kind of hard for me to keep up that practice, and I was like, if people like me who were suffering or struggling through depression could just know that this is one option, that could take the place or work in conjunction with, the medicative process. But I was a strong component person who just didn't want to deal with medications, period. But, so that's what prompted me to be a teacher as well. And it wasn't even a year, I think, I had applied for the teacher training.
All right, at the studio you were going to?
Yeah.
And which studio was that? Where were you? Still in Delaware?
Yeah, I've been in Delaware my whole life.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so within a year, you're like, I want to go deeper. I want to share it.
Yes. I wanted to know what these 26 poses were. I wanted to know the details of each one, like how is it making me feel the way I feel. I wanted to go much deeper and be able to explain it, as opposed to just feeling it and coming out like a brand new person. Like, how is this happening?
Well, I think that's interesting. I think there's a difference. Sometimes, like some classes, and I'm no value judgments, I think they're all great. You go and you kind of get taken a bit on a journey,
Yeah.
And then you get deposited at the end, and you're not necessarily sure how you got there.
Right.
But then there's also classes, and this is what I've been really working on, is sort of like where it's really not about taking you on a journey, but kind of giving you tools so that any journeys that you're going on, you're steering that. Like so I don't know. I'm interested in that idea of the tools that you need to make your own journey or whatever. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Having your own experience without that person guiding you through it or telling you what you should be feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. So in any case, back to where we were, you were saying that you did teacher training, and how did it go? Was it a good training for you? Did you get what you needed from it?
Yeah, my teacher training was amazing. And everything just happened at the right time, I had already explored practicing Reiki, so I was a Reiki practitioner, and coming into yoga just helped, amplify and open me up on a whole another spiritual level and awareness. In my teacher training, there was the chief judge of family court was one of my colleagues in this teacher training, and
nice, the chief judge, eh?
The chief judge of family court, like how
that's
how
random.
Is that?
He's also into yoga, huh?
Very. She.
Oh, see, look at that! I just screwed up. Look at that! Some patriarchal bullshit just came right out of my mouth. Sorry about that. Chief Justice.
Yes.
Family court.
And we all went around the room telling each other, why we were there, and what type of population you wanted to teach, and mostly everybody was there to teach yoga at the yoga studio, and I was just very clear in myself that it wasn't that I even wanted to be a yoga teacher in a studio. I wanted to bring this to rehab centers, and my mom was a recovering addict, and I was like, I would love to give back to the people and the organizations that helped my mom out. I had been incarcerated when I was 20 years old, and 21. And I was like, I would love to bring something like this to, jails and people who just would not normally be exposed to yoga or even think of it as, a healing modality or something that could be beneficial or life-changing. And
I'm sorry, how long were you in jail?
Oh, it was a very short stint.
Yeah.
When I go to my prison classes, they're like, "You were in jail?" And I'm like, "Yeah, 30 days. I did 30 days." But, nonetheless, it was in that 30 days that it was enough for me to say, I will never go back there again.
Well, especially at age 20, it's a really formative time. I mean, I did a bunch of stupid stuff when I was 22, and I just know that so much of like who I became was a result of some of those experiences. I'm sure that 30 days was quite formative.
Yeah, it was. That was another, early life-changing experience. And, at that time, I was a young mother. My daughter was 3 years old, a young single mother. And I lost my apartment. I had to start fresh. I had to start all over coming out of that experience. But, so I knew the people, or I got to know the people that I was incarcerated with, and saw that they came from all walks of life, but for the most part were, low-income families and single mothers like me. And I was like, wow, if I could just get into the prison system and share this yoga and meditation, I think it would be very helpful and life-changing for the people in prison. So that was my mission. And
so you had that in mind when you were in your training. You're like,
yes,
yeah,
that was my primary reason for being in training. And the chief judge got a hold of me and was like, would you be interested in teaching at a juvenile detention center?
Wow. So your training was not only just about training, that was like networking. You hooked up with the Chief Justice. Perfect.
Yeah. No, I had no idea. Yeah. And it was so lightly thrown out there, because I'm really deep into this YTT, and I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And but it was probably a year later that opportunity actually manifested.
The seed was planted, but it blossomed.
Exactly.
The following season. So you end up out of teacher training. Did you teach in the studio too?
Yes, because as soon as I came out of teacher training, I was the only one in my class really who was not teaching a class somewhere. Yeah. And everybody else, was 18 of us, and everybody else had a class. They were teaching for the studio, or the studio had given them corporate classes to teach. And I felt very much, I felt like, oh, this is awful, because I was trying to get into drug rehabilitation centers, and I went to the local jail. I went to the jail that I was incarcerated at and tried to talk to the people who handled programming there and, pitching this whole yoga thing. And nobody was listening. They're like, oh, okay, but there was no callbacks, and, I had to keep coming back, showing up, and it just wasn't going anywhere. So I eventually had to end up taking a studio class just to, I guess, get my voice, my teacher voice,
Yeah, you need to practice. You need to flex that muscle.
Yeah, utilize all the things that had been taught in teacher training. And it was a year later that I actually started to share.
How was teaching at the studio? How did that go for you? What was your experience of being a yoga teacher?
Well, that was very daunting and scary.
In what way? What was scary about it?
Well, I was teaching at so our studio taught classes at a high-end gym, and So at this gym, it was kind of like the mega gym of gyms, and they had hot yoga there, and it was very daunting for me because it became very real that I was a black woman teaching upscale white clientele, and I had never thought about that before. It never, it never dawned on me, or I never had any feeling like that. And
what was the makeup of your training? Who were your fellow trainees? Were there other people of color in your training, or were they all?
It was me and another black woman in our training, mm-hmm. and we struggled with, are there any other black women in mainstream yoga?
Yeah, that's very interesting to me, though, because you're experiencing yoga at home with DVDs. You have this positive experience. You go to group classes, but I imagine you're one of the few people of color there.
Right, exactly.
And then you do training and you start to become a teacher, and I'm sure you come up against that even more. And so now when you have to teach and get up in front of high end.
Yeah, it was the weirdest thing, and it almost like made me not want to teach. Like I had a friend in London who would just give me these pep talks. It's like, you just let it go, or different oils to use, because it was mainly my own insecurity. But it was worth analyzing to figure out what were the roots of that. Where is that coming from?
Were people just giving you bad vibe or making comments? What were the kind of things that you felt like you came up against?
The clientele, my class,
the students.
They loved me. They loved me.
Okay.
They loved me. They were very welcoming. But it was my own.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.